Other
Quantum
than
Crow, Lex, Prism, another Axia member.
Oh, Prism,
He
right?
showed up.
Yeah.
Prism. So we had a lot of fun. We saw some good people there.
And yeah, so I if I go back in the future, and I'm like, one day would have been enough for me. I had a 4-day pass. Thane was there for 2 days. I would have gotten really involved in some of these board game tournaments for sure. I think that could be really fun to just like go in and actually play the board games and hang out. But I didn't know what I was getting into. I didn't want to commit because like board game tournament can be anywhere from an hour to like 6 hours. I feel like depending on how that goes and all that. It was obviously very different with COVID. You had to wear masks the whole time. I felt like people were kind of like distancing themselves a little bit. And then it was also interesting because I've gone to a lot of what we call them festivals in the alcohol industry. So for my distillery and bartending and stuff like that, I've been to a lot of like cocktail festivals and spirits festivals, beer festivals and stuff like that. Nerds are very different. They're very, what do we say? Introverted?
Very introverted. It's a very quiet experience.
Yeah. So
they're all kind of awkward.
So the third day after you left, I got some B-roll, but I also tried to do the interview for like 10 Man and
Channel
Zillin
10 News.
For Channel 10 News. It was rough. It was very rough. I didn't really, and then I listened like after I got the first few, or I got like 2 that I was like, okay, that could be decent. Then I listened back and my GoPro footage, like it was so hard to hear and everything like that. And I was just like, I'm over this. But oh my God, people do like, I don't know.
Yeah, it's definitely a different experience. I'll say that, if I was going to break it down, I would say that it had most of the retailers that I would expect at a PAX.
Mm-hmm.
It had maybe half of the indie games and brands. There weren't that many indie games. There weren't that many brands. And it had one, the Bandai Namco, their new Tales game, Tales of Arise, is coming out. And that's the last like bit of that was there. It wasn't... It wasn't the best. I wish you had had a better first PAX experience, for sure. But, you got in there and saw it. It was, I thought that the panels, so we went to 2 panels, and we've alluded to them. I thought they were interesting. The second was a networking panel, networking in gaming. I thought that was an interesting concept. It seemed to like networking, how to get a job in gaming, how to reach out to people. It was essentially like teaching socially awkward kids, please don't spam my LinkedIn. The first one was very interesting though, and it was the upcoming decade of MMOs, the future decades of MMOs, and they referenced their kids playing Minecraft and Roblox and Genshin Impact. Those are the 3 games that were referenced. New World was mentioned once. Ashes was not mentioned once, but I have, Bart and I, we think it was alluded to for sure. And the big question that came up, and it was talked around, it wasn't really talked about, and I'd love to get your guys' opinions on this. How do we get this genre of new gamer that they can create their own content? They're used to that in Minecraft. They're used to that in Roblox. How do we get that, the kid that wants to play Call of Duty Warzone, the kid that wants to play Fortnite, how do we get the battle royale genre into MMOs? How do we transition them? Because as they get older, and MMOs tend to skew older in the grand scheme of games, how do we get them into MMOs? How do we make that transition? APOC is not the answer.
Relatable IPs doing it. I think it's very hard. So for example, if Fortnite made a survival game, that would be a transition game into an MMORPG, a Fortnite MMORPG. And again, I think, not to go back to the NFT thing, but having something to translate into other games, I think is big. For example, Overwatch, there's a couple of sprays and emblems that you get if you have played WoW. And just at a very basic level, something like that. I don't think that that's going to cause people to play another game. But if somebody's a collector, like if your primary game is Overwatch in that instance, then maybe you will dabble in WoW a little bit, try it out just so you can get the spray, you like it or you don't.
Yeah.
But I think you need already successful IPs to help make that transition. I think it's going to be difficult for the modern day 15 to 19-year-old to go, hey, I want to just sit there and go, hey, I want to play an MMORPG.
Mm-hmm.
I think having something big and super successful will help. A lot of eyes. Asmongold, for example, I think he's probably a huge factor into transitioning people. But he already has kind of like an MMORPG community, right? So it's not as far of a stretch.
Yeah.
Maybe Shroud. Shroud might actually be a better example there. Tim the Tatman. There are these FPS, BR, Valorant and CSGO for Shroud, and Call of Duty Warzone for Tim. Their communities their eyes being opened up to the MMORPG genre within Asher's creation. I think that that's huge. I'm not saying that Asmon's impact isn't big, because it is, but I think if anything, there needs to be a bigger focus on people like Shroud and Tim the Tatman when it comes to Steven's attention, because it's bringing new people into the genre. As far as I'm concerned, the Asmon people are probably already going to try the game, as long as it's somewhat good on launch, right? Like as long as there's enough of a word around it, it's already an MMORPG, they're probably going to try it out. So I think content creators are a big part of that. But unless a company, let's say Blizzard started with Overwatch as a shooter instead of WoW first, I think they would have needed to create something like Diablo next, and then World of Warcraft after that, if they were trying to transition people into MMORPGs. I think it's less about the community's decision to transition, and I think it's more about the developers' decision to transition. It's a difficult genre to develop. You can never please everybody. If you want to be liked as a company, don't create an MMORPG, because you'll never be liked by everybody, and chances are you're actually going to be hated by most. So I think from a developer's mindset, there needs to be enough of a reason to do it. So I don't know if it's necessarily the community. I think the developers kind of gave up on the genre way before the community did.
Agree.
For me, it's about localizing content. And Hashtag brought it up. But that dopamine rush, right? That let's put it this way: kids can't sit down and play, 10 hours of gaming most of the time. They have school, they have a bunch of stuff going on. They have parents.
Casuals.
They're casuals. Exactly. Well, that's it. Exactly. They're casuals. So they get off playing Minecraft because it's a very localized experience. They have their server. They're playing with whoever's on their server, their friends, and they can compare and compete with each other. In an MMO, you can't do that. You're competing with everyone in the world. And you just have people that's all they have in their life, right? The only thing they have in their life is playing games. If that's what you want to do with your life, great. That's fine. I've done that plenty of times with my life. Moving forward, I'm trying to have a better balance, obviously. And that's the key here. And that's where I think Ashes might actually bridge the gap, is that localized thing. Well, you can have your freehold within your node that specializes in what it's doing, and you can log on for a couple hours a day and do that. And hopefully that will actually mean something, right? You will have carved a niche out. You'll have made a name out for yourself if you're doing something a little different, a little special with what you're doing there. Feeling like you're a part of something. So even if you can log on for 2 hours and you're a part of a larger guild and you go gather resources and contribute, then you feel accomplished when your guild gets the accomplishment. They build that that building or that resource or whatever. And so that's the biggest thing for me, is trying to get a sense of accomplishment for casuals. That's what makes the difference.
Now we're talking about casuals, and there was something that was said at the end of this, and I'm surprised the entire room did not riot, because I was ready to riot. One of the developers said that one of the keys with MMOs is to get it down to a play cycle where somebody can jump in for 15 minutes and do something meaningful. I disagree with that wholeheartedly. I think that's way too short.
For the genre.
I get that, like, I can go jump into Fortnite and play for 15 minutes and win a round. I appreciate that, but I just don't feel that that's like true, like actually appropriate for the genre. I think that's the antithesis of what MMOs should be.
You sounded so old describing a win in Fortnite that way.
I was like,
it's a victory royale, bro.
Sorry, a victory royale.
Jump into them. They're one of those rounds in 15 minutes and get a win.
I'm old, and the reason you know I'm old is the only royale I know is Royale with cheese. That was a Tarantino reference for those that don't know. Oh my God, please tell me you've seen Pulp Fiction. Super.
Yes.
Oh my God, if you didn't see Pulp Fiction, we had this conversation this weekend of movies people haven't seen, and I met someone that had since seen Pulp Fiction, and I was very concerned with their upbringing. Not just them, their entire upbringing.
Sorry, I derailed you there.
Welcome to Good Burger, home of the Good Burger.
I agree with what you're saying, and I think that a lot of for two reasons, I think BRs have been so sick. Well, it's the same reason, but for two different types of gamers. You have the I'm gonna generalize here. So you have the kid gamer who's going to school. Maybe they're at the age where they have a job and they're going to school. In today's world, nobody has a fucking job. Anyways, but so they don't have as much time to devote to gaming. Like there are other things to do. Even though most of the time they're just spending their time in front of another screen. Anyways.
Yeah.
So you're able
nothing
to get in.
You do is actually an accomplishment.
so you get in, you do that 45-minute match round, whatever. And if you can do 2, you do 2. If you can do 3, you do 3. If you can only do 1, you do 1. You log off, and then you do the same thing the next day. An MMORPG requires commitment. It just does. Like, you are going to have from a general aspect, the player base is going to be more committed to the game because they put so much more time into it. I mean, if you were to compare numbers, like between somebody who plays MMORPGs versus somebody who plays like a BR, the person playing MMORPGs is going to have put more time into gaming in general, unless they're like a streamer or something like that. Yeah. But I also disagree a little bit, and I think that the modern MMORPG needs to have some aspects to it that do cater. And remember, I'm the asshole elitist hardcore gamer of the group. I've probably said more things about fuck them than anybody else here. So understand that this is me saying this here, that I also understand that they're important to a strong, stable community within a game. And I think that the modern gamer doesn't want to endlessly, even us, doesn't want to endlessly commit their time to a game without a significant level of reward for the amount of time we put into it.
Okay.
If it's WoW, it's rating, right? You're able to get server whatever, world whatever, or just down the content in general and get the gear associated with it. But that takes a lot of time. That takes a lot of dedication. That takes being good at the game, which also takes time. Whether it's time that we devoted since we were 12 or time that we've devoted recently, it takes a lot of time to get good at a game. Generally speaking, some people like Shroud pick up a gun and they can just shoot people in the head. Good to go. It's just whatever. In game. Clarify, in game. Maybe you can do it outside of game. I don't know.
Now we're getting dark.
But I think you need to have something to where I think 15 minutes is too short. I think I would say an hour. I think if you play something for an hour, you should feel like you've gotten something out of the game. Whether even if it's something as basic as, okay, that time was okay, well spent. I mean, if you get into a shitty Overwatch match, it's like, whatever. Okay, I got to, even if it's subconsciously, it could have been a horrible match. Your tanks were throwing, your healers were trash. You didn't hit a single shot. Like, but you were there for the competition, at least. Maybe subconsciously, that's why I keep punishing myself. It's just because of the competition. I still play Overwatch. But so you need something on that level. And MMORPGs have not really scratched that itch. I think a solid crafting system, like a really, really good crafting system, would help with that. Especially one that is not tied to your player power or your player level. Having it separate from that, because that means you can get in, and if you only have, let's say throughout the week you only have an hour, but on the weekends you can play for 8 hours. So during the week you log in, you do some crafting stuff, like maybe Monday you do a bunch of gathering, and Tuesday you can do a bunch of processing, Wednesday you do a bunch of crafting, like kind of a thing. But then the weekend it's like, okay, now I'm going to focus on my character. And so, but having those things and so I think crafting is a big one. I agree with freehold in a sense, as a concept, but from what we know right now, the time and effort that it takes to get a freehold is going to be a little bit more. And that's the only reason why I would say initially it doesn't fall under that more casual player base, just because of the time commitment that's needed to get to it. And again, that's just the perceived time commitment based off of what we know right now. That could change. It could be the wrong perception, or it could end up being the case. I don't know. But so I don't know. Like my knee-jerk reaction is MMORPGs are not for casual players, just as a baseline. But I think that mindset needs to shift a little bit to more what Bart is saying, as far as we need to find these things that help introduce or help people who only have an hour play. Because if we look at it from the approach of how do we get people to play 8 hours a day, I think that's the wrong approach. We need to look at it. How do we make sure that every hour is a rewarding experience? And I think once we hit that magic moment, that magic formula, whatever it is, that's when you have a successful MMORPG that can bridge the gap between BR kids and MMORPG old fucks like us.
And it's tough. That's a tough balance, right? Because I want something meaningful that is going to take me 4 hours a day for a week or 2 weeks, or I have to grind it a little bit every single day. So if you have meaningful things like that, just having those long-term meaningful goals makes the small jump in, I did something for 15, 20 minutes and I accomplished something meaningful for my character, that makes that not meaningful just by design, right? It's the scarcity model. It's the reason that, if they just made a ton of Lamborghinis and sold them for 25 grand each, they wouldn't be this sought after item, right? You're losing the scarcity and the value that went behind the money and the time to track down your special sports car.
Garrison, here's the way that it went wrong. Garrisons and WoW. All the garrison missions and all of that stuff, like the phone mini game, that was to appeal to, I guarantee it was a way to appeal to the more casual gamer, and it tanked with the hardcore gamer. And it actually ended up tanking the economy because they had a lot of resources tied to it as well. So like it's hard. Like I feel like for this specifically, I mean, and this is probably a whole nother conversation. But I feel like specifically, if we were to look at WoW and kind of look at the changes that they have done and pinpoint, okay, they fucked up here, okay, got really, really bad here. Like, because they have been trying to cater to that more casual community for the last 3 or 4 expansions now. And so finding the moments and where they've messed up. And honestly, I feel like every time they have catered to the casual, the expansion has been considered a failure.
So here's the issue. Just because you catered to the casual doesn't mean you could sacrifice the hardcore. And that's where it becomes a failure. Yeah. So when you make something rewarding for a casual, you can't make that detract from someone who has spent all their time and all that, right? Because the hardcore player, and maybe whether they spend money or not, or the whales, or however you want to look at it, they need to feel rewarded. And that's what Ashes of Creation is doing, right? Not everyone gets a trophy. But the thing is, Ashes of Creation is aiming to have a large enough a large enough amount of things to do that not everyone gets a trophy for everything, but you can get a trophy in something if you focus on it. And that's the key right there. It's kind of like life, right? Like not everyone gets a trophy for what they're doing, but if you focus really hard at what you're doing and you're good at what you're doing, you do get a trophy. And, you know, a trophy being many different things.